The civil rights movement was a social movement about the racial injustices against black people in the mid-1950s and 1960s. While there were many prominent activists during the civil rights movement, one of the most controversial of these figures was Malcolm X, also known as Malika Shabazz, who was an African-American Muslim minister and a civil rights leader who was part of the Nation of Islam from 1952 to 1964. The Nation of Islam was an Islamic organization in the 1930s founded by Wallace Fard Muhammad, who believed, among other things, in separatism between black and white Americans, black nationalism, and black pride. According to Louis Ricardo, in June 1963, less than a year before Malcolm would make Hajj as a Sunni Muslim, Malcolm X was arguing for a theological understanding of Allah that was distinctly Muhammad's own cultural formula. Malcolm left the Nation of Islam after learning the extramarital affairs that Elijah Muhammad had with women in the nation and many illegal children. To a 2021 article in the Washington Post, said to be disenchanted with leaders' moral character and hypocrisy, began sharing this knowledge within the nation. 1 month later, Malcolm X left the United States. His subsequent pilgrimage to Mecca and diplomatic tour of Africa and the Middle East influenced his political views and encouraged him to advocate for unity between Africans, Black Americans, and Middle Eastern people. Malcolm visited Mecca, Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, for religious pilgrimage known as Hajj. According to a diary of Malcolm X kept during his travels to Mecca and Africa, he made the Hajj to get a better understanding of true Islam. Hajj is one of the 5 pillars in Islam that every Orthodox Muslim must fulfill if they're humanly able. The others are Shahada, declaration of faith, Salah, prayer, Zakah, charity, and Psalm, fasting during the month of Ramadan. Millions of Muslims go to Mecca to perform their rituals. However, Muslim converts are not allowed to enter Mecca without a special permission from Mahkama Sharia, a Muslim court, which shows you are a true believer. Since Malcolm was converted from the United States, he had to get one of these papers. When Malcolm visited Mecca for Hajj, he met the committee, and the scholar was named Muhammad Harkam, who accepted him as a true Muslim and gave him 2 copies of the Holy Book of the Quran, one in Arabic and one in English, and told him he hoped that he would become a better preacher of Islam in America. When Malcolm entered Mecca, he was also welcomed honorably and respectfully by Prince Faisal ibn Hussein in the palace of Jeddah. Together, Malcolm and the prince continued the pilgrimage, and when they were done, Malcolm and the other pilgrims gathered together at Mount Arafat, which is in Saudi Arabia. Malcolm was asked about his fellow pilgrims what most impressed him about the pilgrimage to Mecca. In the autobiography of Malcolm X, Malcolm described as the brotherhood, the people of all race, colors from all over the world coming together as one. It has proved me the power of one's God. During his pilgrimage, Malcolm took the opportunity to describe to the prince and his companions about the way America has been treating black people of African descent. Malcolm X's pilgrimage to Mecca has not only influenced his previous thoughts about black nationalism, but also his view on brotherhood and unity. Before continuing his diplomatic tour of Africa, Malcolm wrote a letter to America from the Muslim world. Never have I witnessed such a sincere hospitality and overwhelming spirit of true brotherhood as is practiced by people of all color, race, here in the ancient Holy Land. After seeing many positive things in Mecca, including the diversity of the people and their belief in Muslim brotherhood, Mecca was amazed and began to believe that there could be a way for black and white people to work together. By the end of his letter, Malcolm said, "Never would I have ever thought of dreaming that I would ever be recipient of such an honor that in America would be bestowed upon a king, not a Negro." Malcolm's pilgrimage to Mecca inspired him to expand his visit with a diplomatic tour of Africa, where he met a range of intellectuals and political figures, visiting the President of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the Prime Minister of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, and the President of Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, and the President of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta. During his visit to Egypt, Malcolm engaged in a debate at a diplomatic conference for the Organization of African Unity, a diplomatic organization that sought to promote unity among African states to help liberate their countries from the influence of colonialism. In this debate, Malcolm urged that African Americans and Africans around the world have the same problems with racism, colonialism, and white supremacy. Many Africans that Malcolm X met were receptive to his argument, According to George Clay, the director of international studies and associate professor of political science at Morehouse College in Atlanta, Malcolm's fellow Africans had a positive view of him, especially they were impressed with him for several reasons. One, he had determination to reforge the bond of kinship between Africans in Africa and African descent in the United States. Second, he was concerned about Africa's future. Third, he demonstrated dedication and sense of purpose. Malcolm encouraged African countries' representatives to look at African Americans as their brothers. President Nkrumah of Ghana and the other revolutionary of African leaders viewed Malcolm as a major ally in the struggle against colonialism and imperialism. Africans, both on the continent and in the diaspora, need to be dedicated to nationalism, anti-imperialism, and economic independence. At the same time, not everybody supported Malcolm X's ideas. In the diary from that time, Malcolm wrote that there were a real debate going on backstage at this conference as to whether I should be admitted or heard.
There are 22 million of us in America who are also of African descent, and to remind them also that we are the victims of America's colonialism or American imperialism, and that our problem is not an American problem, it's a human problem.
Clay describes how the reactionary sector and minority received him as so-called Black American. In addition, he was assigned a traditional label of a radical who was under the influence of communism. Malcolm overcame this resistance of his ideas by using diplomacy to persuade African countries that the United States should be judged internationally for the way they treated Black people in America. Malcolm was able to pass resolution at the OAU conference regarding the racial injustice against African Americans. The revolution was called Revolution on Racial Discrimination in the United States of America. The resolution expressed deep concern about racism in the United States and called on the United States to eliminate all forms of discrimination based on race, color, and ethnicity. According to Azaria Mugani, a historian and history professor, this was the first time a leader from African's diaspora managed to get the OAU to make statements critical to the U.S. Malcolm's success in securing the passage of the resolution was a major accomplishment. After the OAU resolution passed successfully, Malcolm tried to convince African nations to support a similar resolution at the United Nations. He wanted to bring charges against the United States for human rights violation. Unfortunately, Malcolm X's efforts at the United Nations was not successful. Some African countries responded that they were already dealing with many problems on their own and did not wish to get involved with America's problems. After the OAU passed the resolution, the government of the United States thought Malcolm was getting more dangerous as he was connecting Africans with African Americans. A 1964 article in the New York Times said, "The State Department and Justice Department have begun to take interest in Malcolm's campaign to convince African states to raise the question of persecution of American Negroes at the United Nations." When Malcolm X came back from the Arab world and his diplomatic tour of Africa, he founded an organization called the Organization of Afro-American Unity. In June 1964, Malcolm X gave a famous speech called "By Any Means Necessary," which outlines the goals of the organization.
The purpose of our organization of Afro-American Unity, which has the same aim and objective, to fight whoever gets in our way, to bring about the complete independence of people of African descent here in the Western Hemisphere and first here in the United States, and bring about the freedom of these people by any means necessary.
The Organization of Afro-American Unity was an organization for people of African descent. It emphasized establishment, self-defense, education, political, economic, and social self-determination. Malcolm's journey to Mecca and diplomatic tour of Africa had huge impact on his political and spiritual views. In Mecca, he developed a belief in the possibility of universal brotherhood and began to recognize Black and white people could potentially work together. In 1964, Malcolm learned how, after the OAU, African nations liberated themselves from colonialism. He wanted to use those same methods in America, that if Black people were not being respected in the U.S., they would never be respected anywhere else around the world.